The cabin door exploded inward with a crack like breaking bone. Splinters flew through the air, catching the firelight like scattered embers. A woman stood framed in the doorway, broad-shouldered and defiant, a shotgun leveled at chest height. Her finger rested easy on the trigger, no tremor, no hesitation. Outside, men shouted through the darkness. Gunfire popped and echoed off the mountain walls. Across the room, pressed against the logs near the window, a giant of a man clutched his left shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and thick. His right eye, the only one that worked, stayed locked on the woman with the shotgun. The left side of his face was a roadmap of violence, a twisted scar that ran from chin to hairline, the mark of claws that had tried to take his life and failed. The woman didn't look at him. She stared out into the night, into the muzzle flashes and shadows. Her voice cut through the chaos, steady as stone. "If I die here, I want you to know something. I don't regret coming." The man's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight, pressed harder against the wound. His voice came out rough, like gravel scraped across iron. "You won't die. I let one woman die in front of me already. There won't be a second." She turned then, just for a moment. Their eyes met across the flame-lit darkness. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. A promise, a declaration of war. Then the world went black, 4 weeks earlier. Stillwater, Montana Territory, September 1881. The town squatted in a valley between two ridges of pine and granite, a collection of timber buildings arranged along a single muddy street. The autumn air already carried the smell of coming snow, that sharp mineral scent that warned of hard months ahead. At the far end of town, near the livery stable, a man stood alone, Matthias Crane, 6.5 feet of muscle and silence, shoulders broad enough to block a doorway, hands scarred and calloused from years of skinning animals, chopping wood, surviving. He wore a heavy coat of bear fur, dark and bristling, and beneath the wide brim of his hat, his face told a story no one wanted to hear twice. The scar was impossible to ignore. It started just below his jaw on the right side, carved upward across his cheek, tore through his left eye socket, and disappeared into his hairline. The eye itself was a dead thing, milky white and sightless. The other eye, pale blue and sharp as winter ice, did all the seeing for him. He stood outside the general store, 2 bundles of beaver pelts slung over one shoulder. The storekeeper, a nervous man named Whitaker, counted out coins onto the counter inside. Through the window, Matthias watched him, watched the way his hands shook slightly, the way he avoided looking up. Matthias had that effect on people. A woman crossed the street, saw him, and changed direction without breaking stride. A child pointed, and his mother yanked his hand down, whispered something sharp. Matthias didn't react. He'd grown used to it. Fear was easier to live with than pity. Whitaker finally emerged, holding a small leather pouch. He handed it over quickly, like passing a hot coal. "Heard you ordered another one, Crane." Matthias took the pouch, slipped it into his coat. "That's 7 in 3 years, Whitaker continued. His voice had that peculiar tone people used when they wanted to gossip but were too afraid to commit fully. "Folks are saying you're cursed, saying the mountain ate your soul up there." Matthias said nothing. He turned and walked toward the hitching post where his mule waited, patient and indifferent. Behind him, Whitaker called out, louder now, emboldened by distance, "You keep sending them back, Crane. What's the point?" Matthias stopped. For a long moment, he stood perfectly still. Then, without turning, he spoke. "The point is, I need a housekeeper, not a wife." "Then why do you keep calling them brides?" This time Matthias did turn. Whitaker took an involuntary step backward. "Because that's what they are when they arrive. What they become after a week is their choice." He swung onto the mule and rode toward the edge of town, toward the cemetery. The graveyard sat on a small hill overlooking Stillwater, surrounded by a crooked fence of weathered wood. Matthias dismounted and walked between the headstones, his boots crunching on the frost-covered grass. He stopped at a grave near the far corner. The marker was simple. A wooden cross, carefully carved, treated with oil to resist the weather. The name was still legible. Eleanor Crane, 1848 to 1878. Beloved wife. Matthias knelt. From his coat he pulled a bundle of late-season wildflowers, purple and yellow, already wilting. He placed them at the base of the cross. It's been 3 years, Eleanor. The wind picked up, rustling through the pines behind him. I know you'd want me to move on. Everyone says so. He touched the carved letters of her name, traced them with one finger. But I can't. Not the way they think I should. Footsteps approached from behind, slow and deliberate. Matthias didn't turn. Reverend. Josiah Harper was a tall man, thin as a rail, with white hair and a face creased by 70 years of hard living and harder faith. He wore his collar and a long black coat. His eyes, though, were kind. That was the difference between him and most holy men. Harper had seen enough suffering to know judgment didn't help. You don't have to call me that when it's just us, Matthias. You earned the title. Harper smiled faintly and stood beside him, looking down at Eleanor's grave. She was a good woman. She was. And she wouldn't want you punishing yourself forever. Matthias stood, brushing dirt from his knees. I'm not punishing myself. I'm surviving. By ordering mail-order brides you have no intention of keeping? I keep them for a week. Then they leave. That's their choice. Harper sighed, the sound of a man who'd had this conversation before and knew it wouldn't end differently this time. Matthias, you can't keep living like this, alone up there, shutting everyone out. I'm not alone. I have the mountain. The mountain doesn't talk back. Matthias looked at him then, really looked at him. His good eye was hard as flint. Neither do I, Josiah. That's the point. He walked back to his mule, mounted up, and rode out of town without another word. The stagecoach arrived 3 days later. The entire town knew it was coming. Word had spread the way it always did in small places, passed from the telegraph office to the post office to the saloon to the general store. By noon, half of Stillwater had found reasons to be near the main street. They gathered in small clusters, pretending to conduct business, pretending not to stare. But everyone was watching. Everyone wanted to see the next victim. The coach appeared at the south end of town, pulled by 4 horses caked in dust and sweat. The driver, a grizzled man named Tompkins, hauled on the reins and brought the rig to a stop in front of the post office. The horses stamped and blew, their breath misting in the cool air. Tompkins climbed down from the box, stretched his back, and opened the passenger door. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd leaned forward collectively, holding its breath. Then a hand appeared, gripping the doorframe. A large hand, broad and strong. It was followed by an arm, thick and solid, wrapped in the sleeve of a plain brown wool coat. And then she emerged, Dorothea Sullivan. The stagecoach suspension groaned audibly as she descended, shifting under her weight. She was a big woman. Not tall, 5'8" at most, but substantial. 240 pounds of bone and muscle and flesh that had never apologized for existing. Her shoulders were broad, her arms thick from years of labor. Her waist was heavy, her hips wide. She wore men's work pants beneath her coat, practical and sturdy, and boots that had seen serious use. Her face was round, scattered with freckles, framed by dark red hair, pulled back into a severe braid. Her eyes, green and sharp, swept across the gathered crowd with the kind of assessment that made people uncomfortable. She wasn't looking at them with fear or hope or nervousness. She was measuring them, judging whether they were worth her time. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. A child whispered to her mother and was immediately shushed. Dottie stood on the street, planted her feet, and crossed her arms. Which one of you is Crane? Her voice carried, clear and strong, with a Boston accent that sounded foreign and harsh in this mountain valley. The crowd parted slightly. From the back, Matthias Crane stepped forward. He walked slowly, deliberately, his bare coat making him look even larger than he was. The scar on his face caught the afternoon light. His dead eyes stared at nothing. His good eye locked onto Dottie and stayed there. He stopped 10 feet away and looked her up and down, took in her size, her clothes, her posture. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eye. Disappointment. Calculation. Dottie saw it. She didn't flinch. "I'm Dorothea Sullivan. I don't answer to Dottie for strangers. You can call me Miss Sullivan until I say otherwise." Matthias said nothing. He continued to stare. Dottie stared back. The crowd held its breath again, waiting for the explosion, for her to cry or run or scream at the sight of him. Instead, she spoke again, her tone flat and businesslike. "If you're disappointed because I'm not some fragile little thing, you can keep your $50 deposit. I'll get back on that stage and head to Boston right now. But if you need someone who can work, I'm here." Matthias tilted his head slightly, the barest acknowledgement. "Can you chop wood?" "I pushed a 200-pound bread cart over cobblestone 6 days a week for 8 years. Wood is nothing." A muscle twitched in Matthias's jaw. It might have been the beginning of a smile or a grimace. With him, it was impossible to tell. "Get your trunk. We leave in 10 minutes." He turned and walked toward a wagon hitched near the livery. The crowd began to murmur, a low buzz of shock and speculation. Dottie watched him go, then she turned to Tompkins. "My trunk." Tompkins climbed up to the luggage rack and heaved down a heavy cedar trunk, reinforced with iron bands. He grunted with the effort, nearly dropped it. Dottie grabbed the other end. Together, they lowered it to the ground. "You need help getting it to the wagon, miss?" Dottie looked at the wagon, 20 yards away, looked at Matthias, who was checking the harnesses on his mules and very deliberately not looking in her direction. "No," she said. She bent, gripped the trunk by its iron handles, and lifted. Her face went red. The muscles in her arms and shoulders bunched, but she got it off the ground, walked it step by grinding step to the wagon, and heaved it into the bed. The trunk landed with a thud that shook the wagon frame. Matthias glanced at it, glanced at her, said nothing. Dottie climbed onto the bench seat beside him, smoothed her coat, folded her hands in her lap. Matthias cracked the reins. The mules leaned into their traces, and the wagon lurched forward. They left Stillwater behind, climbing into the mountains, into the forests of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir that crowded the slopes. The road was barely a road at all. 2 ruts worn into the dirt, flanked on one side by a cliff of gray stone and on the other by a drop into darkness. Matthias drove hard. He hit every rut, every exposed root, every patch of loose stone. The wagon jolted and shook. The bench seat had no padding. Every impact transferred directly into bone. It was a test. He'd done it to all the others. By the second hour, they were usually crying. By the third, they were begging him to slow down. Dottie said nothing. She gripped the edge of the seat, braced her feet against the footboard, and absorbed the punishment. Her face went pale. Her knuckles went white, but her mouth stayed shut. Matthias stole glances at her from the corner of his eye, watched her jaw clench with each violent jolt, watched her refuse to give him the satisfaction. After 2 hours, he broke the silence. "There's a room in my cabin. I keep it locked. Don't ask about it. Don't try to open it. That's the only rule." Dottie turned her head slowly, looked at him. "Fine. My rule is this. Don't treat me like a ghost. If you hate me, say it. If you want me gone, say it. But don't ignore me like I'm invisible." Matthias's hands tightened on the reins. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Direct, demanding, equal. After a long pause, he gave a single nod. Deal. 4 more hours passed in silence. The sun dropped behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of copper and blood. The temperature fell. Frost began to form on the wagon rails. Finally, as full darkness closed in, they broke through a stand of pines and the cabin came into view. It sat in a clearing, backed against a sheer rock face, built from massive logs, chinked with mud and moss. The roof was covered in sod, grass still growing on it, already brown and dormant. A stone chimney rose from one end, a thin ribbon of smoke curling upward. Around the cabin, the yard was scattered with the tools of survival, stacks of split wood, stretching frames holding animal hides, rusted traps hanging from nails, a root cellar door set into the ground. Matthias pulled the wagon to a stop, climbed down, began unhitching the mules. Dottie sat on the bench looking at the cabin, at the isolated, lonely, brutal place she would now call home. She climbed down. Her legs were shaking from the cold and the hours of jolting. She walked to the back of the wagon, grabbed her trunk, and dragged it toward the cabin door. Matthias watched her struggle with it, made no move to help. Dottie got it to the door, shoved it inside, and followed it in. The interior was exactly what she expected. One large room dominated by a stone fireplace, a narrow cot in one corner, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves stocked with supplies, a cast-iron stove. The floor was hard-packed dirt, swept clean but stained dark in places she didn't want to think about. It smelled of wood smoke and leather and old blood. But it was warm. The fire had been banked before Matthias left, and embers still glowed in the hearth. Dottie stood in the center of the room, taking it all in. Then she noticed the second door, narrow, wooden, with an iron lock. The room Matthias had mentioned. She walked closer, studied it. The lock was new, well-oiled. The wood around the frame showed signs of careful maintenance. Whatever was behind that door, Matthias wanted it protected. Dottie turned away. Not her business. Not yet. She opened her trunk and began unpacking. Clothes, folded and practical, a few books, a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, tools for baking, and at the very bottom, hidden beneath a false panel, a stack of papers, wanted posters, letters, documents. Dottie glanced toward the door. Matthias was still outside, tending to the mules. She pulled out one of the posters, unfolded it. Her own face stared back at her, rendered in crude ink. The text below read, "Wanted for embezzlement. Dorothea Sullivan. Theft of $15,000 from the Vanderbilt Hotel, Boston, Massachusetts. Reward, $2,000. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she folded it carefully and placed it back beneath the false panel. Beneath the poster was a letter. The paper was stained, wrinkled, as if it had been read and reread many times. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "Sister Dottie, I'm sorry. Chef Ashford threatened to kill you if I didn't confess. I told them you stole the money to protect you, but now he's coming for me. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Run, live, please, Duncan." Dottie's hands trembled. She closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and forced the emotion back down. She had cried for Duncan already. Cried when she found his body in the Charles River, bloated and gray, the official report calling it an accident. Cried when she realized Victor Ashford had poisoned him to silence the only witness. She wouldn't cry again. Grief was a luxury. Survival was the priority. She replaced the letter, closed the trunk, and stood. Outside, she heard Matthias returning. His boots crunched on the frozen ground. The door opened, and he stepped inside, bringing a gust of cold air with him. He looked at her. She looked back. Neither spoke. Matthias walked to the stove, added wood, coaxed the fire higher. Dottie walked to the shelves, began taking stock of the supplies: flour, salt, dried beans, coffee, smoked meat, the basics. She could work with this. Matthias sat at the table, pulled off his gloves, and watched her move around the cabin, watched her assess, organize, plan. Finally he spoke. "You'll sleep in the corner. I'll sleep near the door." "Fine. I leave before dawn most days. Checking traps, hunting. I'll be gone hours at a time." "I'll manage." He stood, walked to a cupboard, and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Poured 2 fingers into a tin cup, drank it in one swallow. "The other women," he said, his voice rough. "They didn't last because they expected something I couldn't give." Dottie turned to face him. What did they expect? Kindness? Romance? A husband who talked? He poured another drink. "I'm not kind, I'm not romantic, and I don't talk unless I have something to say." Dottie crossed her arms. "Good. I didn't come here for kindness or romance. I came here for a roof, a stove, and a name that isn't Sullivan." Matthias looked at her, really looked at her. saw something in her eyes he recognized. A hardness, a resignation, the look of someone who had already lost everything and was simply going through the motions. He nodded slowly. "Then we'll get along fine." He set the cup down, walked to the cot, and lay down fully clothed, turned his face to the wall. Dottie stood in the firelight watching him, watching the way his shoulders tensed even in rest, the way his hand stayed near the knife at his belt. This was a man at war with himself, a man haunted. She understood that. She was haunted too. She moved to her corner, spread a blanket on the floor and lay down, closed her eyes, listened to the fire crackle and the wind howl outside. Sleep didn't come easy. It never did anymore. Instead, her mind drifted back to Boston, back to the Vanderbilt Hotel. She saw Victor Ashford's face, handsome, charming, the head chef, admired and envied. He had pursued her relentlessly. Flowers, compliments, proposals. She had refused every time, politely at first, then firmly, then harshly. And when harsh refusal didn't work, Victor had turned vicious. The missing money, the forged ledgers, the accusations. And when Duncan tried to protect her, tried to confess to a crime he didn't commit, Victor had silenced him permanently. Dottie opened her eyes, stared at the rough beams of the ceiling. Victor was still out there, still hunting. She'd seen the letter he'd sent to the bakery a week before she fled. "My dearest Dorothea, you cannot run from me. I will find you. And when I do, you will understand that you were always mine. If I cannot have you alive, I will have you in death." She believed him. Men like Victor didn't make empty threats. But here, in this isolated cabin on a frozen mountain, she had bought herself time. Maybe enough time to disappear completely. Or maybe just enough time to prepare for the inevitable. Across the room, Matthias shifted in his sleep, muttered something too low to hear. Dottie wondered what ghosts followed him, what secrets he locked behind that door. She would find out eventually. People always revealed themselves, given time. For now, though, she would sleep. Or try to. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. The next 6 days passed in a rhythm of cold silence and unspoken warfare. Matthias woke before dawn each morning, dressed in the dark, and left without a word. He would return hours later with game or empty traps, his face expressionless, his clothes stained with blood and mud. He tracked that mud across the floor Dottie had spent an hour scrubbing the day before. She said nothing, just fetched the bucket and scrubbed it again. He left the wood box empty, knowing she would need it to keep the cabin warm while he was gone. She pulled on a heavy coat, walked to the woodpile, and split enough logs to last 2 days. He ate her cooking without comment, without gratitude, as if it were his due. She cooked better meals the next day, meals that filled the cabin with smells of bread and roasted meat and herbs, and watched him struggle not to react. It was a battle of wills, silent, relentless. But Dottie had been fighting battles her whole life. She knew how to endure. On the 4th day she made bread, real bread from the sourdough starter she'd carried all the way from Boston, wrapped in oilcloth and kept alive with careful feeding. The smell filled the cabin like a living thing. Yeast and warmth and comfort. Matthias came in from the cold, stopped in the doorway, and closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just long enough to breathe it in. When he opened his eyes again, his expression was carefully blank. He sat at the table. Dottie set a plate in front of him, thick slices of bread, still warm, with butter melting into the crust. He ate slowly, methodically, didn't look at her. After 5 minutes of silence, he stopped, set down his fork. "Eleanor used to make this." Dottie paused in her work at the stove. "Your wife?" "Yes." "Where did she learn?" "Her mother, in Pennsylvania, before we came west." Dottie turned to face him. "Where did you learn?" Matthias asked. "My mother, in Boston, before she died." Their eyes met across the table. A flicker of understanding passed between them, shared loss, shared memories of women who had taught them that bread was more than food. It was love made tangible. Matthias looked away first. "It's good." "Thank you." He finished eating, stood, and walked out without another word. But something had shifted. Not much, just a crack in the wall. On the 6th day, Dottie heard a sound from the locked room. It was late afternoon. Matthias had been gone since before sunrise. She was alone in the cabin working at the stove when she heard it. A low creak, like floorboards settling, or like someone moving inside. She stopped, listened. Nothing. She walked to the locked door, put her ear against the wood. Silence. Then, faintly, a whisper of sound. Wind, maybe, coming through a crack in the wall. Dottie knelt, peered through the keyhole. The room beyond was dim, lit only by a narrow window high in the wall. But she could make out shapes. A bed, neatly made. A dresser. Clothes hanging on pegs. And on the dresser, a framed photograph. A woman. Young, delicate, with dark hair and soft eyes. She wore a wedding dress. Beside her stood Matthias, younger, unscarred, almost smiling. Eleanor. Dottie pulled back from the keyhole, her heart pounding. This wasn't a storage room. It was a shrine. A place frozen in time, preserved exactly as Eleanor had left it. Matthias wasn't just grieving. He was trapped. Dottie stood, backed away from the door, and returned to the stove. She wouldn't mention it, wouldn't ask. That would come later, when he was ready, if he was ever ready. That evening, as the sun set and the temperature dropped, Reverend Harper arrived. Dottie heard the horse before she saw it. Hoofbeats on the frozen ground, slow and steady. She looked out the window and saw an old man in a black coat riding up to the cabin. Matthias emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He and Harper spoke briefly, their voices too low to hear. Then Harper dismounted and walked toward the cabin. Dottie opened the door before he could knock. Harper stopped, surprised. Then he smiled, warm and genuine. "You must be Miss Sullivan." "I am?" "Reverend Josiah Harper. I'm the pastor down in Stillwater. Just came to check on Matthias. And on you." "We're fine." Harper glanced past her, into the cabin. "You're still here. That's more than the others managed. I'm not the others." Harper studied her face, his expression thoughtful. "No, I can see that." He stepped inside, hung his hat on a peg. Matthias followed, carrying a bundle of supplies Harper had brought. The three of them sat at the table. Dottie poured coffee. The silence stretched, but it wasn't hostile, just careful. Finally, Harper spoke. "How are you finding life on the mountain, Miss Sullivan? Cold, quiet, honest?" Harper smiled. "Honest. That's a good word for it. Matthias is many things, but dishonest isn't one of them." Matthias said nothing, just drank his coffee. Harper turned to him. "You look better than the last time I saw you." "I'm fine." "You're eating real meals again. That's something." Matthias glanced at Dottie. She met his gaze calmly. Harper caught the look. His smile widened. "Well, I won't keep you. Just wanted to make sure everything was well, and to remind you both that if you need anything, the church is always open." He stood, retrieved his hat. At the door he paused. "Miss Sullivan, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you come here, really?" Dottie considered the question, considered all the ways she could lie, deflect, avoid. Instead, she told the truth. "Because I had nowhere else to go." Harper nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's the best reason." He left. The sound of his horse faded into the distance. Matthias stood by the window, watching him go. "He's a good man," he said quietly. "He seems to be. He was the one who married Eleanor and me, and the one who buried her." Dottie waited, sensed that Matthias was on the edge of saying more, but the moment passed. He turned from the window, walked to his cot, and lay down. Dottie cleaned the coffee cups, banked the fire, and retreated to her corner. She lay in the darkness, listening to Matthias breathe, and for the first time since arriving, she felt something other than fear or exhaustion. She felt curious. What had happened to Eleanor? How had she died? And why did Matthias lock her room like a tomb? The answers would come. Dottie was patient, but 300 miles away in a city that never slept, another man was asking questions too. Boston, 3 days earlier. The office was opulent, rich mahogany paneling, leather chairs, a desk the size of a dining table. Behind it sat a man in his mid-40s, handsome in a cold, calculated way. Victor Ashford, head chef of the Vanderbilt Hotel, beloved by critics, feared by his staff. Across from him sat another man, older, harder, Captain Lewis Grant, late 50s with gray hair and a face carved from granite. He wore a long coat and carried himself like the soldier he used to be. Confederate cavalry, dishonorably discharged for war crimes, now a Pinkerton agent who specialized in the kind of work other agents refused. Victor slid an envelope across the desk. Grant opened it, counted the bills inside. $5,000, Victor said. Half now. Half when you bring me proof. Proof of what? That Dorothea Sullivan is dead. Grant raised an eyebrow. You don't want her brought back? No, I want her eliminated, quietly. Make it look like an accident if you can. If you can't, I don't care. Just make sure she never comes back. Grant folded the envelope, slipped it into his coat. Why? That's not your concern. It is if it affects the job. Victor leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers. She refused me, humiliated me, turned me into a laughingstock among my peers, and when I tried to handle the situation quietly, her pathetic brother interfered. I had to silence him. Now she's run, and she's carrying evidence that could destroy me. Grant's expression didn't change. What kind of evidence? Letters, documents, proof that I framed her for embezzlement, proof that I killed Duncan Sullivan. And you think she'll use it? Eventually, when she feels safe. I can't allow that. Grant stood. Where is she? Montana Territory, a town called Stillwater. She arrived by stagecoach 2 weeks ago. After that, the trail goes cold. I'll find her. See that you do. Grant turned to leave. At the door, he paused. This woman, is she dangerous? Victor laughed, a cold, bitter sound. Dorothea? She's a baker. A fat, plain, pathetic baker. She's no threat to you, Captain. Just make sure she disappears. Grant nodded and walked out. Victor sat alone in his office, staring at the empty chair across from him. Soon, Dorothea, soon you'll understand. If I can't have you, no one will. He poured himself a glass of brandy and drank to the dead. The scream tore through the cabin like a wounded animal. Dottie jerked awake, heart hammering. For a moment she couldn't orient herself. The darkness was complete. The fire burned down to nothing but faint red embers. Then the scream came again, raw and desperate, and she understood. Matthias. She threw off her blanket and crossed the cabin in 3 strides. His cot was against the far wall, and in the dim glow she could see him thrashing, tangled in his bedding. His face twisted in anguish. Sweat sheened his forehead despite the cold. Eleanor, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. The words came out broken, choked. He wasn't awake. He was somewhere else entirely, trapped in a memory that wouldn't let him go. Dottie hesitated. She'd been here 4 weeks now. They'd established a careful distance, a respectful boundary. This would shatter it completely. But the man was suffering. She knelt beside the cot and placed a hand on his shoulder. Matthias, wake up. He didn't respond. His hands clawed at the blanket, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Please, Eleanor, please don't look at me like that. I had to. Dottie shook him harder. Matthias, you're dreaming. Wake up. His eyes snapped open. In one fluid motion, he surged upward, his hands shooting out and gripping her shoulders, not violently, but with desperate strength. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot and quick. For 3 heartbeats they stayed frozen like that, his fingers digging into her flesh. Her hands braced against his chest. Then recognition flooded his face. The terror faded, replaced by confusion, then shame. He released her and collapsed back onto the cot, covering his face with his hands. God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Dottie sat back on her heels, giving him space but not retreating entirely. You were having a nightmare. I know. A bad one. They're all bad. She waited. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Finally, Matthias lowered his hands. His face was wet. Tears tracked down through the beard, glinted in the ember light. Dottie had never seen a man cry before, not like this, not with such complete, hopeless surrender. "I killed her," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I killed Eleanor." Dottie went very still. "Tell me." And so he did. The words came slowly at first, dragged up from some deep buried place, but once they started, they couldn't be stopped. It had been 3 years ago, late autumn, much like now. Matthias had gone hunting, planning to be gone 3 days. He'd needed to stock meat for the winter. Eleanor had urged him to go, had kissed him goodbye, had told him not to worry. The second day, while setting snares near a creek, Eleanor had been bitten. A fox, rabid and foaming. It had come out of nowhere, latched onto her hand before she could react. She'd killed it with a rock, stumbled back to the cabin, washed the wound. When Matthias returned 2 days later, she'd seemed fine. A little quiet, maybe, a little pale. But she'd smiled, had welcomed him home, had made his favorite meal. The symptoms started a week later. First, just discomfort around the wound. Then, sensitivity to light. Then, the headaches. By the second week, she couldn't keep food down. By the third, she was having trouble swallowing water. Matthias had ridden to Stillwater, brought back the doctor. The doctor had taken one look at Eleanor and known. Rabies. There was no cure. There never had been. Once symptoms appeared, death was certain, and it would be horrific. Paralysis, hallucinations, hydrophobia so severe she would rather die of thirst than drink. Madness, agony. The doctor had been blunt. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Then she would be gone. Matthias had sent the doctor away and stayed with Eleanor. Watched her deteriorate day by day, hour by hour. Watched the woman he loved transform into something else, something terrified and suffering and barely human. On the last day, she'd had a moment of clarity, a brief window when the disease released its grip long enough for her to speak. She'd looked at him with those soft brown eyes, still Eleanor underneath the ravages of illness, and she'd said the words that would haunt him forever. "Don't let me become a monster, Matthias, please. I love you. End it." He'd held her, stroked her hair, told her he loved her too, and then he'd pressed his revolver to her heart and pulled the trigger. The sound echoed in the cabin as Matthias finished speaking. Dottie sat motionless, absorbing the weight of what he'd told her. "I buried her myself," he continued, his voice hollow. "Told everyone in town she'd died of the disease. Only Josiah knows the truth. I confessed to him, asked for absolution. He gave it. But I can't accept it." "Why not?" "Because I'm the one who pulled the trigger. I'm the one who ended her life. How can I ever forgive myself for that? How can I ever deserve to be happy again?" Dottie leaned forward, her voice firm. "You didn't kill her, Matthias. The rabies killed her. You just stopped the suffering. I could have waited, let nature take its course. And watched her spend 2 more weeks in agony, watched her lose her mind completely. That's what you call love?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. Searching her face for judgment, for disgust, he found neither. "What you did was mercy," Dottie said quietly. "The hardest kind. The kind that costs everything. Eleanor asked you to do something impossible, and you loved her enough to do it. That's not murder, that's sacrifice. But I'm the one who has to live with it. Yes, you do, and you'll carry that weight for the rest of your life. But carrying guilt doesn't mean you have to punish yourself forever. It doesn't mean you can't let anyone else in." Matthias turned away, staring at the wall. "Every woman who's come here I've driven away on purpose. I've been cruel, cold. I wanted them to leave, because if they stayed, if I let myself care again, and something happened, you're afraid you'll have to make that choice again. I can't. I won't survive it a second time." Dottie reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough, scarred, trembling slightly. "Then don't make that choice. Let me make my own choices. I'm not Eleanor. I'm not delicate or fragile or helpless. I'm here because I choose to be. And if something happens to me, that's on me, not you." He looked down at their joined hands. At the contrast between his massive calloused palm and her broad, strong fingers. "Why are you still here, Dottie, really?" She'd known this question would come eventually. She'd prepared a dozen different answers, each one a deflection or half-truth. But he'd given her honesty, raw and terrible and complete. She owed him the same. "Because I'm running from a man who wants me dead." Matthias's head snapped up. "What?" Dottie took a breath and began her own confession. She told him about Victor Ashford, about the relentless courtship, the proposals, the refusals, about the day she'd finally told him, in front of the entire hotel kitchen staff, that she would rather die alone than marry him, about how the money had gone missing 2 days later. $15,000 from the hotel accounts. How the ledgers had been doctored to implicate her. How Victor had orchestrated the whole thing with surgical precision. About Duncan. Sweet, foolish Duncan, who'd tried to protect her, who'd confessed to a crime he didn't commit, thinking it would satisfy Victor's rage and keep Dottie safe. About finding Duncan's body in the Charles River 3 weeks later. The official report called it accidental drowning, but Dottie had seen the bruises on his throat, had read the letter he'd managed to hide in his boarding house, the letter that laid out everything. Victor had poisoned Duncan with arsenic, slow and painful, then dumped the body to make it look like an accident, and then Victor had come for Dottie. She pulled a letter from her dress pocket, crumpled and stained. She'd carried it with her every day since leaving Boston. Matthias took it, read it by the dim light. "My dearest Dorothea, you cannot run from me. I will find you. And when I do, you will understand that you were always mine. If I cannot have you alive, I will have you in death. Eternally yours, Victor." Matthias's jaw tightened. His hand clenched around the letter, crumpling it further. "When did you get this?" "The day before I left Boston. It was waiting at the bakery where I worked. Victor knew I'd go there one last time. He wanted me to know he was hunting me." "And you think he'll find you here?" "I think he'll try. Men like Victor don't give up. They're obsessed with control. Losing me, having me refuse him, it broke something in him. He won't stop until I'm dead." Matthias stood, walked to the window, stared out into the darkness. "How long do we have?" "I don't know. I was careful. Used a false name to buy the ticket. Paid cash. Destroyed anything that might link me to Montana. But if he's hired Pinkertons, if he's paying enough money, they'll eventually track the stagecoach records. They'll find Stillwater, and they'll come here." "Yes." Matthias turned to face her. His expression was hard, cold, the expression of a man who'd made a decision. "Then we prepare." "Matthias, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He crossed the cabin in 3 strides, pulled her to her feet. "You said you're not Eleanor. You're right. Eleanor was gentle, kind. She wouldn't hurt a fly. You're different. You're strong. You're a fighter. I don't know how to fight." "Then I'll teach you." His hands were on her shoulders, his face close to hers. "I let one woman die. I won't let it happen again. Not to you. Not while I'm still breathing." Something shifted in the air between them. The careful distance collapsed. Dottie felt it like a physical thing, a wall falling away. She reached up and touched his face, traced the scar with her fingers. He flinched but didn't pull away. "You're not a monster, Matthias. You're just a man who's been hurt." "So are you. Hurt, I mean." "Yes." "Then maybe we can help each other." He leaned forward. She met him halfway. Their lips touched, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't desperate. It was something quieter, an acknowledgement, a promise. When they pulled apart, Matthias rested his forehead against hers. "I can't promise you'll be safe, but I promise they'll have to go through me first. That's all I'm asking." They stood like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, holding each other in the ember glow. Then Matthias stepped back. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start training." "Training for what?" "Survival." The next morning, Matthias woke Dottie before dawn. Outside, the world was still dark, frost glittering on every surface. Their breath misted in the frigid air. He handed her a rifle. "Ever shot one?" "No." Time to learn. They walked to the edge of the clearing. Matthias set up targets, pieces of wood nailed to trees at varying distances. For the next 2 hours, he taught her how to hold the rifle, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of jerking it, how to compensate for distance and wind. Dottie's shoulders ached. Her ears rang despite the cloth Matthias had given her to stuff in them, but she kept trying. The first 20 shots went wide. The next 10 hit the tree but missed the target. By shot 40, she grazed the edge of the wood. By shot 60, she hit center mass. Matthias stood behind her, his hands guiding her shoulders into position. Good. Again. She fired. The wood splintered. Better. Keep your breathing steady. Don't anticipate the recoil. Another shot. Another hit. He stepped back, crossed his arms, watched her work through the rest of the box of ammunition. When the last shell casing hit the ground, Dottie lowered the rifle. Her arms were shaking. Sweat ran down her back despite the cold. Matthias nodded. You're a natural. I feel like I've been kicked by a mule. You'll get used to it. We'll do this every day until it's instinct. They returned to the cabin. Dottie made breakfast while Matthias cleaned the rifles. The domestic routine felt surreal after the violence of the morning. Over coffee, Matthias pulled out a map, hand-drawn, crude but accurate. It showed the cabin, the surrounding terrain, the approaches from town. If they come, they'll come from here. He pointed to the main trail. It's the only route that's passable for horses. We can set traps along it, slow them down. What kind of traps? Pitfalls, tripwires, anything that gives us warning and time. Dottie studied the map. What about the back? The rock face? Too steep to climb. No one's coming that way. Are you sure? Matthias looked at her. Why? Because if I were hunting someone, I'd look for the route they thought was impossible. He considered this, then nodded slowly. You're right. We'll need to watch all sides. They spent the afternoon fortifying, boarding up windows on the vulnerable sides, stockpiling ammunition, moving supplies into the root cellar in case they needed to retreat. Dottie worked alongside Matthias, hauling wood, driving nails, organizing. Her body protested. Her muscles, used to the repetitive labor of baking, struggled with this new kind of work. But she pushed through. As the sun began to set, Reverend Harper arrived again. This time his face was grim. Matthias met him at the door. What's wrong? Harper dismounted, tied his horse. There are men in town, asking questions. Dottie appeared in the doorway. Harper looked at her, then back at Matthias. They're asking about a woman. Description matches Miss Sullivan exactly. Matthias's hands clenched into fists. Pinkertons? The leader says he's a Pinkerton, Captain Lewis Grant, but I've heard of him. He's not the kind of agent they send to retrieve fugitives. He's the kind they send when they want someone to disappear. Dottie felt her stomach drop. How many? 5 total. Grant and 4 hired guns. Matthias looked at Dottie. How long do we have? Harper shook his head. I told them nothing, but someone in town will talk. Money has a way of loosening tongues. You have 2 days at most, maybe less. We're not running, Matthias said. Matthias, these aren't ordinary men. Grant has a reputation. He doesn't take prisoners. He doesn't leave witnesses. Good. Neither do I. Harper put a hand on his arm. You can't fight 5 armed men alone. I won't be alone. He looked at Dottie. She stepped forward, stood beside him. We hold here, she said. This is our home. Harper looked between them, saw the determination in their faces, the connection that had formed in just 4 weeks. He sighed. Then God be with you both. Is he? Matthias asked quietly. After everything I've done? Harper met his eyes. God doesn't abandon us, Matthias. We abandon him. But his door is always open, even for men like us. He remounted his horse. I'll try to buy you time, send them on false trails, but be ready. He rode off into the gathering darkness. Matthias and Dottie stood in the doorway, watching him go. We should eat, Matthias said finally. Build up our strength. They went inside. Dottie made venison stew, thick and rich. They ate in silence, both lost in thought. After the meal, as Dottie cleaned the dishes, Matthias walked to the locked door. He stood there for a long moment, his hand on the key. Then he unlocked it. The door swung open. Dottie turned, surprised. Matthias gestured for her to follow. Inside, the room was exactly as she'd glimpsed through the keyhole. Eleanor's room, preserved like a museum. But now she could see more details. The wedding dress on its stand, yellowed slightly with age. A brush on the dresser, strands of dark hair still caught in the bristles. Books on a shelf, their spines uncracked for 3 years. And on the wall, sketches. Dozens of them. Dottie stepped closer, studying them. They weren't the delicate drawings of flowers and landscapes she'd expected. They were dark, chaotic, faces twisted in anguish, hands reaching for something unseen, abstract shapes that suggested violence and fear. She drew these during her bad days, Matthias said quietly, the days when the darkness took her. She had something wrong with her mind, some kind of sickness the doctors couldn't name. Most of the time she was fine, happy, loving. But sometimes, without warning, she'd spiral down into a place I couldn't reach. He touched one of the drawings. A woman's face screaming. She'd lock herself in here, draw until her hands bled. I'd sit outside the door and listen to her sob. And when it passed, when she came back to herself, she'd pretend it never happened. We both did. You loved her anyway, Dottie said. I loved her more because of it, because she was fighting so hard, because she refused to give up. He turned to face Dottie. That's why I could pull the trigger, because I knew what fighting looked like. I knew how hard she'd struggled, and when she asked me to end it, I knew she'd reached the limit of what she could endure. Dottie took his hand. What do you want to do with this room? Matthias looked around, at the shrine he'd maintained for 3 years, at the ghost he'd been living with. I want to let her go. Together they began dismantling the shrine. They folded the wedding dress carefully, placed it in a trunk. They packed the books, the clothes, the personal items. They took down the sketches, stacked them gently. The room slowly emptied, became just a room again. When they finished, Matthias stood in the doorway. Thank you. For what? For not judging her, for not judging me. We all have darkness, Matthias. The question is what we do with it. He closed the door, but this time he didn't lock it. That night they sat by the fire. The cabin felt different somehow, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Matthias added wood to the flames. Dottie mended a torn shirt. After a long silence, he spoke. If we survive this, I want you to stay, not as a housekeeper, as my wife, really. Dottie's hand stilled. Are you asking or telling? Asking. She set down the mending, looked at him across the firelight. I'll stay, but not because I need you to save me. I'll stay because I choose you, because you're the first person in years who's treated me like an equal. You are my equal. Then treat me like one. When they come, we fight together. No protecting me, no sacrificing yourself. We stand side by side. Matthias held out his hand. She took it. Together then. Together. They sat like that, hands clasped, watching the fire burn down to embers. Neither slept much that night. Both knew what was coming. The storm was gathering, and soon it would break over them with terrible force. 300 miles away, Captain Lewis Grant studied a map by lamplight. His men were camped outside Stillwater, waiting for his orders. He'd sent 2 of them into town to gather information. They'd returned with everything he needed. The woman was on Dead Pine Ridge, living with a mountain man named Matthias Crane, isolated, vulnerable. Grant smiled. This would be easier than he'd thought. He'd killed 17 people in his career as a Pinkerton, mostly men, a few women. All of them had been easy once you understood their weaknesses. Crane's weakness would be the woman, threaten her, and he'd fold. Grant rolled up the map and walked to where his men sat around a small fire. We move at dawn. 4 of us go up the mountain. 1 stays here with the horses. What's the plan, Captain? Asked one of the men, a lean, cruel-faced gunfighter named Pike. Simple. We surround the cabin, give them a chance to surrender. If they don't, we burn them out. And if they do surrender? Grant's smile widened. Then we kill them anyway. Victor wants proof she's dead. I intend to deliver." The men laughed. Dark, ugly sounds. In the shadows beyond the firelight, a figure watched. Lila Chen had been tracking these men since they'd arrived in Stillwater. She'd recognized Grant's name from wanted posters, knew his reputation. She'd been listening to the townspeople gossip about Dottie Sullivan, about the accusations, about the truth that was slowly emerging. Lila knew about poison. She was an herbalist, trained in both healing and harm. She'd read the reports about Duncan Sullivan's death, recognized the symptoms of arsenic poisoning. This woman was innocent, and these men were going to kill her. Lila slipped away into the darkness. She had a long ride ahead of her. She had to warn them. Back at the cabin, Matthias and Dottie worked through the night. They moved furniture to create barricades, filled buckets with water in case of fire, loaded every gun they owned, and placed them strategically around the cabin. As dawn approached, they stood together at the window, watching the tree line, waiting. Matthias checked his rifle for the 10th time. "You remember what I taught you? Breathe steady. Don't anticipate the recoil. Aim for center mass." "Good." Dottie loaded her own rifle, her movements now confident and sure. "Matthias?" "Yes, I'm not afraid." He looked at her, saw the truth in her eyes. "Neither am I." The sun broke over the eastern peaks. Golden light flooded the valley, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. And in that light, they saw movement. 5 riders emerged from the tree line. Captain Grant had arrived. The riders came slowly, deliberately, spread out in a line across the clearing. They knew what they were doing. This wasn't their first siege. Captain Lewis Grant rode in the center, tall and composed in the saddle. He wore a long, dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. On his right rode Pike, the gunfighter, lean and twitchy as a starved coyote. On his left, a massive man with a scarred face and dead eyes. The other 2 flanked wide, cutting off any retreat to the sides. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin, just outside accurate pistol range, well within rifle range, but they were counting on hesitation, on fear. They didn't know Matthias Crane. Grant raised one hand. The universal signal for parley. Matthias stood at the window, rifle already shouldered and aimed. Dottie was positioned at the opposite window, her own rifle steady. "Miss Sullivan!" Grant's voice carried clearly across the frozen ground. "My name is Captain Lewis Grant. I'm a duly appointed agent of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. You're wanted for embezzlement in Boston, Massachusetts. Come out peacefully and you won't be harmed." Dottie's finger rested on the trigger. Her voice, when she answered, was loud and clear. "I didn't steal anything. Victor Ashford framed me and murdered my brother. I'm not going anywhere." Grant sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. "Miss Sullivan, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I have a legal warrant for your arrest. If you refuse to surrender, you're only making things worse." "Show me the warrant," Matthias called out. Grant turned his attention to the cabin's other window. "And you must be Crane. The mountain man, I've heard about you. Union sharpshooter, wasn't it? 37 confirmed kills at Gettysburg." Matthias said nothing. "I'm a reasonable man, Crane. This doesn't have to involve you. Turn over the woman and we'll leave. You can go back to your peaceful existence. No one needs to die today." "You're right," Matthias said. "No one needs to die, so turn your horses around and ride back to Stillwater." Grant smiled. There was no warmth in it. "I'm afraid I can't do that. I have a job to complete, and I always complete my jobs." He gestured to his men. They began to spread out further, circling the cabin. Matthias tracked the movement through his sights. He could drop Grant right now, one shot. But that would start a war he wasn't sure he could win. Not yet. "Last chance, Miss Sullivan," Grant called. "Come out now or we come in." Dottie glanced at Matthias. He gave a slight shake of his head. She turned back to the window. "Go to hell." Grant's smile vanished. He lowered his hand sharply. The world exploded in gunfire. The hired guns opened up with rifles and pistols, a thunderous barrage that hammered into the cabin walls. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Bullets punched through the gaps in the shutters, whined through the interior. Dottie dropped below the window line, covering her head as debris rained down. Matthias stayed calm, waited for a break in the firing. When it came, he rose smoothly and fired. The crack of his rifle cut through the chaos. 50 yards away, Pike jerked backward in his saddle. The bullet punched through his chest just below the collarbone. He tumbled from his horse, hit the ground hard, blood spreading across his shirt. His body twitched once, then went still, dead. The other gunmen scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and trees. Their horses bolted, spooked by the gunfire. Grant remained mounted, utterly calm. He looked down at Pike's body, then back at the cabin. "You're Union Army, all right," he called. "That was a hell of a shot." He dismounted in one fluid motion and took cover behind a thick pine. "You got one of mine, Crane. Now I'm going to get one of yours." The siege settled into a rhythm, sporadic gunfire, long periods of tense silence, probing attacks that were driven back. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, then began its descent. Inside the cabin, Matthias and Dottie took turns at the windows. They conserved ammunition, only firing when they had clear targets. Matthias's training showed. Every shot he took had purpose. Every bullet found its mark or came close enough to keep the attackers honest. Dottie was learning fast. She didn't have Matthias's skill, but she had steady nerves and good instincts. She'd wounded one of the hired guns, sent him limping back to cover. But they both knew this couldn't last. They had ammunition, but not unlimited amounts. They had water, but the cabin was cold. The fire had burned down, and they couldn't risk the smoke giving away their positions. And Grant knew it too. He was a patient man. He'd wait them out. As afternoon faded into evening, the attack stopped completely. Grant pulled his men back to the tree line, just visible in the gathering darkness. Matthias lowered his rifle and rubbed his eye. The strain of constant vigilance was wearing on him. Dottie brought him water. Their hands touched as he took the cup. Neither let go immediately. "How much ammunition do we have left?" she asked quietly. "Enough for maybe another day, if we're careful. And then? Then we improvise." She managed a smile at that. Even now, in the middle of a war, he could surprise her. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For bringing this to your door. You should have sent me away that first day." Matthias set down the cup and took both her hands in his. "If I'd sent you away, I'd still be living with a ghost. You gave me a reason to fight again, to feel again. Don't apologize for that. Even if it gets us killed, we're not dead yet." They sat together in the darkness, backs against the wall, shoulders touching. Outside, they could hear Grant's men talking in low voices, making plans. "Tell me something," Dottie said. "Something about before Eleanor, before the war." Matthias was quiet for a long moment. "I grew up in Pennsylvania, small farm. My father raised horses, best horses in the county. I was supposed to take over the farm when he died. What happened? The war happened. I enlisted in '61, thought I'd be home in 6 months, ended up fighting for 4 years. When I came back, the farm was gone, sold for taxes. My mother had died of fever. Everything I knew was just gone. So you came west." "So I came west. Met Eleanor in a church in Ohio. She was singing in the choir. I'd never heard anything so beautiful. We were married 3 weeks later." Dottie smiled in the darkness. 3 weeks? That's fast." "When you know, you know. We came to Montana together. Built this cabin with our own hands. For 5 years, it was paradise. Then the darkness started creeping into Eleanor's mind, and then the fox. And then—" he trailed off. Dottie squeezed his hand. "My turn," she said. "I grew up in Boston. Irish neighborhood. My mother was a baker. My father was a drunk who disappeared when I was 7. My mother worked herself to death feeding us Duncan and me. She taught me everything she knew about baking. When she died, I was 16. I took over her job at a hotel bakery, worked my way up to head baker by the time I was 25. That's young for that position. I was good, better than good. I could make bread that would make grown men cry, pastries that looked like art. Victor noticed. He was a chef, ambitious, brilliant. Everyone thought we'd make a perfect pair, the brilliant chef and the talented baker. But you didn't love him. I didn't even like him. He was charming in public, cruel in private. I saw how he treated the staff, how he'd humiliate people for sport. When he proposed, I refused. When he persisted, I embarrassed him in front of everyone. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. No, men like Victor don't handle rejection well. He orchestrated everything perfectly. The missing money, the false ledgers, Duncan trying to protect me. And when Duncan became a liability, Victor eliminated him. Her voice cracked on her brother's name. I found Duncan's body myself, pulled it out of the river. He'd been dead 3 days. The police called it an accident. But I knew. I could see the poison in his face, the way he'd suffered. Matthias pulled her close. She leaned against his chest, letting the tears come. I ran because I was afraid, not of prison, of Victor. He'd already killed once. He wouldn't hesitate to kill again, so I took what money I had, bought a ticket west, and answered your advertisement. Do you regret it? She pulled back, looked at him in the dim light. No, never. Even now, with 5 killers outside waiting to murder us, I don't regret it. These last 4 weeks have been the freest I've felt in years. Matthias kissed her then, soft and gentle, a promise and a prayer. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. We're going to survive this. How can you be so sure? Because I'm not ready to lose you, and I'm a stubborn son of a bitch. She laughed despite everything. The sound was startling in the tense silence of the cabin. Outside, the temperature continued to drop. Frost formed on the windows. The moon rose 3/4 full, casting silver light across the clearing. And in that moonlight, they saw movement. 2 of Grant's men were creeping toward the cabin, low and slow. They carried bundles wrapped in cloth, kerosene. Matthias raised his rifle, but Dottie put a hand on his arm. Wait. Let them get closer. If they reach the cabin, they won't. She moved to the door, rifle in hand. Matthias watched, confused. Dottie pulled back the heavy bar, cracked the door open just wide enough to fit the rifle barrel through. The 2 men were 15 feet away now, 10 feet. They thought they were being stealthy, thought the darkness concealed them. Dottie fired. The first man went down with a scream, clutching his leg. The second man froze, startled. Matthias fired from the window. The second man dropped. Both men crawled back toward the tree line, leaving trails of blood in the frost. Their kerosene bundles lay abandoned in the clearing. Grant's voice cut through the night. Impressive, Miss Sullivan, but you can't hold out forever. I have food, water, warm fires. What do you have? A cold cabin and dwindling ammunition. We have something you'll never have, Dottie shouted back. A reason to fight. Grant laughed. Oh, I have reasons. 5,000 of them. Victor Ashford is paying me very well to ensure you never leave this mountain. Dottie went cold. Victor sent you? Of course. Did you think this was really about embezzlement? Victor doesn't care about the money. He cares about you, or rather, about erasing you. He's a proud man. You humiliated him, refused him. In his mind, you need to be punished, and if he can't have you, he'll make sure no one can. Rage flooded through Dottie, hot and fierce. She'd known Victor was behind this, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the casual cruelty in Grant's voice, ignited something primal. Tell Victor something for me, she shouted. Tell him I'm not afraid of him. Tell him I'm going to survive this. And when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he is. A murderer, a coward, a pathetic little man who can't handle being told no. Silence from the tree line. Then Grant's voice, harder now. Brave words, but they won't save you. We're going to wait until you're too weak to fight back. Then we're coming in. And when we do, I'm going to make you watch while I kill Crane. Slowly. Then I'm going to finish you. Victor said he wanted proof. I'm thinking your head should suffice. Matthias fired at the sound of Grant's voice. The bullet smashed into the tree Grant was hiding behind, spraying bark. You want to kill me? Matthias roared. Then come try. Stop hiding behind trees and fight like a man. Grant's laughter echoed across the clearing. I don't need to fight like a man. I just need to win, and I always win. The night stretched on. No more attacks came, but the psychological warfare continued. Grant's men would call out taunts, threats, descriptions of what they planned to do. Matthias and Dottie ignored them. They took turns sleeping in short shifts, conserved their strength, waited. Near midnight they heard a new sound, hoofbeats, coming fast. Matthias moved to the window, rifle ready. Friend or foe? A single rider burst from the tree line, racing toward the cabin. Grant's men fired at the newcomer, but the rider was too fast, too erratic. The horse skidded to a stop near the cabin door. The rider dismounted and pounded on the wood. "Miss Sullivan! Mr. Crane! It's Lila Chen! Let me in!" Matthias and Dottie exchanged glances. Matthias moved to the door, rifle ready. Dottie covered him from the window. He pulled the door open. Lila stumbled inside, breathing hard. She was small, Chinese, dressed in men's clothing. Her face was flushed from the cold ride. Matthias slammed the door shut and barred it. "What are you doing here?" Lila caught her breath, accepted water from Dottie. "I came to help, and to bring information." "What information?" "Grant isn't just a Pinkerton. He's wanted in 3 territories for murder. He's a killer for hire, and he has reinforcements coming. 3 more men from Helena. They'll be here by dawn." Dottie's heart sank. They could barely hold off 5 men. 8 would be impossible. "There's more," Lila continued. "I found evidence about your brother, Duncan Sullivan. I have contacts in Boston, herbalists. We compared notes about his death. He was definitely poisoned. Arsenic, administered over several weeks. There's no way it was accidental." "I know Victor killed him," Dottie said, "but now we can prove it. I have testimony from 3 doctors who examined the body. I have the apothecary records showing Victor purchased arsenic 2 weeks before Duncan died. And I have a witness who saw Victor put something in Duncan's tea." Dottie grabbed Lila's shoulders. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I've sent copies to the territorial marshal in Helena, to the Boston police, to newspapers in 5 cities. By next week, Victor Ashford will be the most wanted man in America." Hope flared in Dottie's chest, but it was immediately tempered by reality. "That's wonderful, but it doesn't help us right now. We still have Grant outside and reinforcements coming at dawn." Lila smiled grimly. "That's why I'm here. I know these mountains. I know trails Grant doesn't. If we leave now, we can be 20 miles away by sunrise." Matthias shook his head. "We're not running." "Matthias," Dottie said gently, "maybe we should consider—" "No, this is our home. I'm not giving it up to a hired killer." "But if we stay, we die." "Maybe. Or maybe we win." Lila looked between them. "You're both insane. You know that, right?" Matthias almost smiled. "Probably, but we're also stubborn." Matthias almost smiled. "Probably, but we're also stubborn." Lila hesitated, then pulled another piece of paper from her coat. Her expression darkened. "There's something else. Something I learned in Stillwater before I rode up here." Dottie felt a chill run down her spine. "What?" "Victor Ashford left Boston 3 weeks ago. He told the hotel management he was taking emergency leave due to a family matter. But my contacts in the Chinese community, we have networks that span the whole country. They sent word. Victor bought train tickets west, to Chicago, then to Denver, then to Helena." Matthias stood straighter. "Montana." "Yes, he's not content to let hired guns handle this. He wants to see it done himself. Men like Victor, obsessed men, they can't delegate revenge. They need to witness it, to control it." Dottie's hands began to shake. She pressed them flat against the table. "He could already be here with Grant." "That's what I fear," Lila said quietly. "Grant arrived in Stillwater 5 days ago. If Victor was traveling hard, pushing his horses, he could have caught up by now. He could be camped out there with them, waiting for dawn." The cabin fell silent. The weight of this new information settled over them like a shroud. Matthias walked to the window, peered out into the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. "If Victor is out there," he said slowly, "this isn't just about money anymore. Grant is a professional. He'll leave if the situation turns against him. But Victor—" "Won't stop until I'm dead," Dottie finished. "I know." She stood, walked to Matthias's side. "He'll come into the cabin if he can. He won't be satisfied with a bullet from a distance. He'll want to look me in the eyes, to make me understand that I belong to him, even in death. Matthias turned to face her. Then we make sure he never gets that chance. A bullet slammed into the wall, making them all flinch. Grant's voice carried through the night. A bullet slammed into the wall, making them all flinch. Grant's voice carried through the night. I see you have a visitor, Crane. The Chinese herbalist. That's fine. We'll kill her too. More witnesses, more money. Lila's jaw tightened. I've dealt with men like him before. They think they're untouchable. They're wrong. She pulled a small cloth bag from her coat. I brought something. Wolfsbane and hemlock, mixed into a tincture. Put it in their water supply and they'll be dead by morning. Matthias looked at the bag. That's murder. They're here to murder you. It's self-defense. It's still poison. We do this clean or not at all. Lila sighed and put the bag away. Fine. Then what's the plan? Matthias walked to the map he'd drawn earlier. He'd been studying it during the lulls in fighting, thinking, planning. They expect us to hunker down, to defend. That's what anyone would do when outnumbered. So we do the opposite, Dottie said, understanding. So we do the opposite. We attack. Lila stared at him. Attack? How? Matthias pointed to the map. There's a drainage tunnel under this cabin, built by the original owner. It runs from the root cellar out to that ravine, about 70 yards east. Comes up in heavy brush. Grant doesn't know about it. How does that help? I go through the tunnel, come up behind their position. While they're focused on the cabin, I hit them from behind. Dottie shook her head. That's suicide. It's tactical. Grant has them spread out watching the cabin. They won't expect an attack from their rear. I can take out 2, maybe 3 before they realize what's happening. And then you're trapped in the open with 5 men shooting at you. 4 men. Pike is dead. 2 are wounded. That leaves Grant and 1 other. And Grant is overconfident. He thinks he's already won. Lila considered the plan. It could work, if you're fast, if you're lucky. I'm both. Dottie grabbed his arm. No, we said we'd fight together. I'm not letting you go out there alone. Someone needs to stay here. Keep firing from the cabin. Make them think we're both still inside. If they realize I've left, the whole plan falls apart. Then I'll go through the tunnel. Dottie, I'm smaller. I'll fit better. And I'm not helpless. You've trained me. Let me help. Matthias looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the steel in her spine. He'd promised to treat her as an equal. That meant trusting her. All right. But you take the revolver, not the rifle. Close quarters fighting. And Lila stays here, helps me keep up the fire from the cabin. Lila nodded. I can shoot. Good. Because once Dottie engages, they're going to throw everything at this cabin. They prepared quickly. Matthias gave Dottie his revolver, showed her how to check the cylinder, how to aim for center mass in the dark. Remember, don't hesitate. These men won't. I know. He kissed her hard. Come back to me. Always. Lila positioned herself at one window. Matthias took the other. Dottie descended into the root cellar, found the tunnel entrance. It was narrow, barely wide enough for a person. Dirt and roots crowded the passage. She took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and crawled in. The tunnel was worse than she'd imagined. Claustrophobic, cold, and barely wide enough. Her shoulders scraped the dirt walls. Twice she got stuck, had to exhale completely, force herself through. Panic clawed at her throat. What if she got wedged? What if she couldn't breathe? But she pushed the fear down, kept crawling, inch by agonizing inch. Water dripped from the ceiling, soaking her clothes. Roots scraped her face and hands. More than once she had to stop, fight down panic, force herself to keep moving. Behind her, she heard Matthias and Lila open fire. The sound was muffled by earth, but still audible. The diversion had begun. She crawled faster. The tunnel seemed endless. 20 yards, 40, 60. Her shoulders ached. Her knees were raw. But she pushed on. Finally, she saw moonlight ahead, the exit. She emerged in a tangle of brush, exactly where Matthias had said. She was behind the enemy position, hidden by vegetation and darkness. She could see them now. Grant crouched behind a thick pine, directing fire at the cabin. The other man, the big one with the scarred face, was 20 feet to Grant's left. The two wounded men were further back, tending their injuries. Dottie checked the revolver. 6 shots. She'd have to make them count. She moved through the brush, silent as she could. Her heart hammered. Her hands shook, but she kept moving. 10 feet from the big man, 5 feet. She raised the revolver, aimed at his back. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Then a twig snapped under her foot. The big man spun, impossibly fast for someone his size. He saw her, his eyes widening. Dottie fired. The revolver kicked in her hand. The bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He roared in pain and rage. Grant whirled, saw Dottie, understood immediately what had happened. "Behind us! She's behind us!" The two wounded men struggled to their feet, raising their weapons. Dottie fired again and again. 2 more shots. One of the wounded men went down. The other ducked behind a rock. The big man was on her now, despite his wound. He slammed into her like a freight train, knocking the revolver from her hand. They hit the ground hard, rolling through the brush. He was massive, strong. His hands closed around her throat. But Dottie wasn't the fragile woman he expected. Years of hauling bread carts and kneading dough had given her solid strength. She brought her knee up hard, connecting with his groin. He grunted, his grip loosening. She rolled, grabbed a rock, and smashed it into his temple. He went limp. Dottie scrambled to her feet, searched frantically for the revolver, found it half buried in dirt. Gunfire erupted all around her. Grant and the last man were shooting at her position. Bullets tore through the brush, whined past her head. She fired back, blind, just trying to keep them down. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze. A scream from the cabin. Female. Lila. Grant had sent someone around. While Dottie was engaging them here, another attacker had circled to the cabin's blind spot. Dottie ran, crashed through the brush, heading back toward the cabin. She could hear Matthias roaring, firing frantically. She broke into the clearing just in time to see a figure climbing through a window. Victor Ashford. He'd been here all along, waiting, watching, and now he was inside the cabin with Matthias and Lila. Dottie sprinted across the open ground. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet, but she didn't slow. She hit the cabin door, slammed it open. Inside was chaos. Victor had Lila by the hair, a knife at her throat. Matthias stood frozen, rifle aimed, but unable to fire without hitting Lila. Victor's face was twisted with rage and madness. His expensive clothes were muddy and torn. But his eyes, when they locked on Dottie, burned with possessive fury. "Dorothea, my love, finally, I've come so far to find you." Dottie raised the revolver, her last 2 shots. "Let her go, Victor." "Or what? You'll shoot me? We both know you won't. You're not a killer, Dorothea. You're a baker. Soft, gentle. That's what I loved about you. You don't love me. You never did. Love doesn't frame. Love doesn't murder. Love doesn't hunt." "I had to," Victor's voice cracked. "You refused me. Humiliated me. Everyone laughed, everyone. I couldn't allow that. I'm Victor Ashford. I'm brilliant. I'm successful. No one refuses me." "Duncan did what you asked. He confessed. He tried to protect me. And you killed him anyway." "He knew too much. He would have talked eventually. I had to eliminate the risk. And now you have to eliminate me." "Yes." Victor's face softened, became almost tender. "Insane. But I don't want to, my love. I wanted us to build a life together, a restaurant. The finest in Boston. Your bread, my cuisine. We would have been unstoppable." "We would have been miserable." His face hardened again. "Then you've chosen death. If I can't have you, Dorothea, no one will. I'll kill you. I'll kill your mountain man. I'll kill this Chinese whore. And I'll burn this cabin to the ground." He pressed the knife harder against Lila's throat. A thin line of blood appeared. Dottie didn't think, didn't hesitate. She fired. The bullet took Victor in the chest, just left of center. He staggered back, the knife falling from his hand. Lila scrambled away. Victor looked down at the spreading red stain, looked up at Dottie. His expression was one of complete shock. You shot me." Yes. But you loved me. You must have. All those months. All my efforts. I never loved you, Victor. I pitied you. He collapsed to his knees, blood pouring from the wound. Pity? Pity? I'm Victor Ashford. I don't need pity from a fat Irish baker. Dottie walked closer, the revolver still aimed at his head. No, you're just a sad little man who couldn't accept that some things can't be controlled. Some people can't be owned. Victor lunged for the knife. Dottie fired her last shot. He fell forward and didn't move again. The cabin went silent except for the sound of breathing. Heavy, ragged. Matthias lowered his rifle and moved to Dottie. She was shaking now, the adrenaline draining away. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. Lila touched her throat, looked at the blood on her fingers. Superficial. I'll live. Outside, a voice called, Ashford, status! Grant. He didn't know Victor was dead. Matthias moved to the window. In the moonlight, he could see Grant and the last hired gun advancing cautiously toward the cabin. It's done, Grant, Matthias shouted. Ashford is dead. Your employer is gone. You've got no reason to keep fighting. Grant stopped, considered. How do I know you're not lying? Matthias dragged Victor's body to the doorway, shoved it outside. Grant looked at the corpse, then at the cabin. For a long moment, silence. Then Grant laughed, a cold, bitter sound. Well, that simplifies things. He turned to his remaining man. We're leaving. What? But the woman? The woman has no bounty now. Ashford was paying us. Ashford is dead. I don't work for free. But we lost 3 men. And we'll lose more if we keep fighting a Union sharpshooter who's dug in with unlimited ammunition. I'm a killer, not an idiot. We're done here. He walked to where the horses were tied, mounted up. The last hired gun looked between Grant and the cabin. Finally, he followed. They rode away into the darkness. Matthias, Dottie, and Lila stood in the doorway, watching them go. None of them could quite believe it was over. He really just left, Dottie said. He's a mercenary, Lila said. No money, no fight. Victor was the only reason he was here. Dottie looked down at Victor's body, the man who'd destroyed her life, who'd killed her brother, who'd hunted her across half a continent. She felt nothing, no satisfaction, no relief, just exhaustion. Matthias put his arm around her shoulders. It's over. Is it? Lila has the evidence about Duncan, about Victor's crimes. Your name will be cleared. You're free. Free. The word felt strange. Foreign. Dottie leaned into Matthias, let herself feel his warmth, his strength. What now? Now we bury the bodies, clean up, rebuild what we can, and we start living again. Together? If you'll have me. Properly this time, not as a mail-order bride, as my wife. Dottie looked up at him, at his scarred face, his gentle eye, his strong jaw. Yes, I'll have you. They kissed as the sun began to rise over the eastern peaks. Golden light flooded the valley, washing away the shadows of the long night. Lila cleared her throat. I hate to interrupt, but we should probably deal with the bodies before they start to smell. Matthias laughed. Actual, genuine laughter. It was a sound Dottie realized she'd never heard from him before. Practical as always, Lila. They spent the morning taking care of the grim necessities. Victor and the dead hired guns were buried in unmarked graves far from the cabin. The wounded were tied to horses and sent back to Stillwater with messages for the sheriff. By afternoon, Reverend Harper arrived, bringing half the town with him. They'd heard the gunfire, seen the riders fleeing. Harper took in the scene. The bullet-scarred cabin, the exhausted survivors, the graves. Merciful God, you actually did it. You survived. We did more than survive, Matthias said. We won. Harper looked at Dottie. The territorial marshal will want statements, but Lila has already sent him evidence clearing you of the Boston charges. You'll need to testify eventually, but you're free to stay here. No one will arrest you. Dottie felt tears on her cheeks. Free. Actually, truly free. Thank you, Reverend. Don't thank me. Thank your stubborn courage. And your mountain man. He turned to Matthias. I'd like to perform a proper wedding, if you're interested." Matthias looked at Dottie. She smiled and nodded. "We're interested." The wedding was held a week later in the small church in Stillwater. The entire town attended. It was the social event of the season, the mountain man who'd finally found peace, the baker who'd fought off killers. Dottie wore a simple dress made by Lila from fabric donated by the general store. Matthias wore his best clothes, freshly cleaned. His scar was visible, but he didn't try to hide it. When Harper pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. At the reception, held in the church hall, the townspeople who'd once feared Matthias now clapped him on the back, congratulated him. Lila approached Dottie with a cup of punch. "You did well, Miss Sullivan. Or should I say, Mrs. Crane?" "Mrs. Crane. That sounds good." "It does. And you deserve it, after everything you've been through." "We both do. You risked your life coming to warn us." Lila shrugged. "I know what it's like to be hunted, to be judged for things you didn't do. We outsiders have to stick together." She raised her cup. "To new beginnings." Dottie clinked her cup against Lila's. "To new beginnings." 6 months later, spring arrived in the Montana Territory. The snow melted from the high peaks. Wildflowers bloomed in the meadows. The world came back to life. At the cabin on Dead Pine Ridge, Matthias stood outside chopping wood. His movements were easy, practiced. The physical labor no longer felt like punishment. It felt like purpose. Inside, Dottie kneaded bread dough. Her hands worked the mass with practiced efficiency. The sourdough starter from Boston, carefully maintained through winter, gave the bread its distinctive tang. She was 7 months pregnant. The baby had been a surprise, a happy one. When she'd told Matthias, he'd gone pale, then red, then picked her up and spun her around despite her protests. Now, as she felt the baby kick, she smiled. A daughter, she hoped. Someone to teach, someone to protect. The door opened and Matthias came in, carrying an armload of wood. "That should last us through tomorrow." "Good, we'll need it. Lila's coming for dinner." "And Reverend Harper?" "Him too. I invited half the town. We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Dottie held up a letter that had arrived that morning. "This, from the Boston District Attorney. Victor's crimes have been officially documented. Duncan's death ruled a homicide. My name completely cleared. And a formal apology from the Vanderbilt Hotel." Matthias took the letter, read it. "Justice, finally. Yes, Duncan can rest now." She touched the small photograph on the mantel. Duncan, young and smiling, before everything went wrong. Matthias came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her expanding waist. "He'd be proud of you." "I hope so." A knock at the door interrupted them. Matthias opened it to find Lila standing there, a basket of herbs in one hand and a bundle of newspapers in the other. "I brought medicine for the baby," Lila said, stepping inside, "and news from back east." She set down the basket and spread the newspapers across the table. Headlines from Boston, New York, Chicago, all featuring the same story. Vanderbilt chef, exposed as murderer and embezzler. Victor Ashford's crimes uncovered. Hotel baker exonerated posthumously. Dottie picked up the Boston Herald, scanned the article. Her hands trembled slightly as she read. "They found everything," Lila said quietly. "Once I sent the evidence about Duncan's poisoning, investigators started digging deeper. Victor had been embezzling from the hotel for 3 years. Your $15,000 was just one transaction among dozens. The total came to over $60,000. Matthias whistled low. $60,000, that's a fortune. He was desperate, Lila continued. Gambling debts, bad investments. He'd built this reputation as a brilliant chef, successful restaurateur, but behind the scenes he was drowning in debt. When you refused his proposal, Dottie, you weren't just rejecting him romantically, you were rejecting his solution. Dottie looked up from the newspaper. His solution? He planned to marry you, use your skills to open a restaurant together, use the restaurant as a front to launder the stolen money. Your reputation as a baker was spotless. No one would suspect a business partnership with you. But when you said no, and worse, humiliated him publicly, you destroyed his escape route. So he tried to destroy me instead. Yes, frame you for embezzlement, eliminate Duncan when he tried to help, then have you killed in Montana so the whole mess died with you. But he underestimated you." Dottie set down the newspaper and looked at Lila. "And the Vanderbilt Hotel? What happened to it?" "Closed for 6 months during the investigation. New management took over. They've offered full restitution to everyone Victor defrauded, including Duncan's estate. The money went to his landlady since he had no other family. She used it to start a scholarship fund in his name." Dottie felt tears prick her eyes. Duncan's death had meaning now, his memory honored. "The hotel reopened last month," Lila added. "They invited you to return as head baker, full salary, your own kitchen, complete creative control." Matthias's arms tightened around Dottie. "And what did you tell them?" he asked quietly. Lila smiled. "I told them Miss Sullivan was dead, but Mrs. Crane was very much alive and very much happy in Montana." Dottie turned in Matthias's arms, looked up at him. "I don't want to go back, not even for a visit. Boston is the past. This is home now." "You're sure?" "Completely." Lila began gathering the newspapers. "I thought you'd say that, so I brought something else." She pulled a small leather pouch from her basket and handed it to Dottie. "Sourdough starter from the hotel kitchen, the same starter your mother used, the same one you brought west. I asked the new head baker to send a portion. Thought you might want it. For the baby, to pass down the tradition." Dottie opened the pouch. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a jar of bubbling starter. The same yeasty, tangy smell that had filled her mother's kitchen. The smell of home, of heritage, of love made edible. She looked at Lila, unable to speak through her tears. Lila squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be proud of you, Dottie. You survived. You fought. You built a new life. That's the greatest legacy anyone can leave." They stood like that, looking out the window at the mountains, at the valley below. "Do you ever regret it?" Matthias asked. "Coming here? Everything that happened?" Dottie turned in his arms, looked up at his face. "Never. Not once. You gave me something I'd never had before." "What's that?" "A home. Not just a place, a real home with someone who sees me, all of me, and loves me anyway." "I don't love you anyway. I love you because you're strong, because you're brave. Because you refused to give up even when the whole world was against you. We were good for each other. We are good for each other." The baby kicked again. Matthias felt it through Dottie's dress and laughed. "She's going to be a fighter, just like her mother. Or like her father. God help us if she's like both of us." Dottie laughed and kissed him. That evening, their friends arrived. Reverend Harper with fresh supplies, Lila with herbs and medicines, several townspeople with food and gifts for the coming baby. They ate together around the table Matthias had expanded to accommodate guests. They talked and laughed and told stories. And for the first time in years, the cabin felt alive, full, complete. Later, after everyone had left, Matthias and Dottie sat by the fire. "You know what I realized today?" Dottie said. "What?" "A year ago I thought my life was over. I thought Victor had taken everything. My job, my home, my brother, my future. And now? Now I have more than I ever dreamed. A husband who loves me, a baby on the way, friends, a community, freedom. You fought for all of that. We fought for it, together." Matthias stood and walked to the locked room, the room that had been Eleanor's shrine. He opened the door. Into it had been transformed. The wedding dress was gone, packed away respectfully. The dark drawings had been removed. In their place, a crib, a rocking chair, shelves ready for baby clothes, a nursery. "Eleanor would approve," Dottie said from the doorway. "You think so?" "I know so. She loved you. She'd want you to be happy, to have a family again." "I still miss her." "I know. And that's okay. You can miss her and love me at the same time. The heart is big enough for both." Matthias pulled Dottie close. "How did I get so lucky?" "You didn't get lucky. You took a chance on a desperate woman who showed up on your doorstep. You could have sent me away." "Best decision I ever made was letting you stay. Second best. The first was asking me to be your wife." They stood in the nursery, imagining the life that would soon fill it, the laughter, the tears, the love. Outside, the last light faded from the sky. Stars emerged, brilliant and cold. The mountain stood silent and eternal. But inside the cabin, there was warmth, light, hope. Dottie and Matthias had come to this place broken and haunted. But they'd found something neither expected. They'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd found themselves. Two people the world had rejected. Two people who'd been told they weren't enough. Together, they were everything. The fire crackled. The baby kicked. And in the quiet of the mountain night, two hearts beat as one. This was home. This was family. This was love. And it was just beginning. The end. Epilogue. 1 year later, autumn, 1882. A stagecoach rumbled into Stillwater carrying passengers from the east, among them a young woman nervous and uncertain. She stepped down onto the muddy street clutching a small valise. Her eyes scanned the buildings, searching for the post office where her future husband was supposed to meet her. Mail-order bride, just like so many before her. She was afraid. This was a wild place, unknown, dangerous. A couple walked by, the man tall and scarred, the woman broad and strong. She pushed a baby carriage. They were laughing about something. The young woman watched them pass, noticed how the man looked at his wife, how she looked back at him. The baby between them, content and loved. The young woman felt some of her fear ease. If they could find happiness here, maybe she could too. She picked up her valise and walked toward the post office. Behind her, Matthias and Dottie Crane continued down the street, unaware of the hope they'd just given a stranger. They had their own life to live, their own story to write, and it was a beautiful story indeed.